My name is Madison Claire Hartley. I'm 26 years old, and I'm about to tell you the story of how my arrogance, my superficiality, and my complete inability to see past physical appearance cost me the opportunity of a lifetime and destroyed my closest friendship in the most publicly humiliating way imaginable. This is the story of how I thought I was so clever, so above everyone else, so justified in my shallow judgments, only to discover that I was being tested the entire time, and I failed so catastrophically that I lost everything, including my own dignity and self-respect, in front of hundreds of people who now know exactly what kind of person I truly am beneath my pretty face and designer clothes. 6 months ago, I was living what I genuinely believed was the perfect life in Manhattan, working as social media manager for luxury fashion brand making $70,000 a year, which was decent money but nothing extraordinary, supplementing my income with my own Instagram presence, where I had built following of 400,000 people who followed me for fashion content, beauty tips, lifestyle posts, showcasing my carefully curated existence in New York City. I wasn't mega influencer like some people with millions of followers, but I had solid engagement and made additional $15,000 to $20,000 annually through brand partnerships and sponsored content. Altogether, I was earning enough to live comfortably in a small but nice apartment in Upper East Side that I shared with 2 roommates, wear designer clothes that I got through combination of purchases and PR packages, maintain the appearance of successful young woman living glamorous city life. But more than my career or my income or my Instagram following, what really defined me and gave me sense of identity and superiority was my looks and my social circle. I was conventionally attractive, I knew it, and I used it as currency in every aspect of my life. I had long blonde hair that I maintained with expensive highlights and keratin treatments. I worked out obsessively to maintain slim-toned figure. I spent hundreds of dollars monthly on skincare and makeup. I dressed impeccably in latest fashion trends. I was the type of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room, and I derived enormous amount of my self-worth from that external validation. My social circle consisted entirely of people who were similarly attractive, successful, wealthy, or at least appeared wealthy. We were a group of young professionals in Manhattan who spent our weekends at exclusive clubs and rooftop bars, brunching at trendy restaurants in Soho and West Village, attending gallery openings and fashion events, taking carefully curated photos for Instagram that showcased our seemingly perfect lives. And I was absolutely, unquestionably, undeniably obsessed with physical appearance to a degree that was genuinely pathological, even though I would never have admitted it at the time. I judged everyone I met primarily on how they looked. If someone wasn't conventionally attractive, I literally would not give them time of day. I considered them beneath my notice, not worth my energy or attention. I had never dated anyone who wasn't extremely good-looking. I had turned down guys who had great personalities or successful careers simply because they didn't meet my physical standards. I had ended relationships when men gained weight or showed any sign of physical imperfection that I found unappealing. My best friend Emily, who had been my roommate since we both moved to New York 5 years ago, was similarly beautiful and similarly focused on appearance, though I would come to learn that unlike me, she actually had depth and character beneath her pretty exterior while I was hollow all the way through. 2 months ago on Friday evening, I was at upscale wine bar in Tribeca with Emily and 3 of our other close friends, Sophia, Lauren, and Amanda, having our usual girls' night where we drank expensive wine, gossiped about our social circle, judged people around us, and generally behaved like entitled privileged women who thought they were better than everyone else. The conversation had turned to topic of dating and relationships. We were all single at the time and complaining about how difficult it was to find quality men in New York, by which we meant men who were good-looking, successful, wealthy, and willing to commit. Basically, we wanted perfect package and refused to settle for anything less. I swear all the good ones are taken, Sophia said dramatically. She was VP at marketing firm and made 6 figures, but was perpetually single because her standards were impossibly high. Every attractive guy I meet is either already in relationship, not interested in commitment, or turns out to be complete jerk. That's because you're too picky, Amanda said. She worked in finance and dated extensively but never for very long because she would find some physical or professional flaw in every man she dated and end things. You rejected that banker last month because his teeth weren't white enough. His teeth were yellow, Sophia protested. I'm not going to kiss someone with yellow teeth, that's disgusting. I don't think we're too picky, I interjected, feeling need to defend our high standards. We work hard, we take care of ourselves, we deserve men who are on our level. Why should we settle for someone unattractive or unsuccessful just because society says we should give everyone a chance? Physical attraction matters. It's not shallow to acknowledge that. Emily, who had been relatively quiet during this conversation, which was unusual for her since she was typically most outspoken in our group, looked at me with expression I couldn't quite read, something between amusement and disappointment. Do you really think physical appearance is most important factor in compatibility, Madison? Not most important, I said defensively, but it's definitely important. You can't build relationship without physical attraction. And let's be honest, we all judge people on their looks first. That's just human nature. But would you give someone a chance if they weren't conventionally attractive but had amazing personality? Emily pressed, and there was something about the way she asked the question that felt like challenge rather than genuine curiosity. In theory, sure, I said, though we both knew I was lying. But in practice, I've never met someone truly unattractive who had such amazing personality that it overcame their appearance. Usually, if someone is unattractive, it's because they don't take care of themselves, which suggests lack of discipline and self-respect. That's harsh, Madison, Lauren said, though she didn't sound disapproving so much as impressed by my brutal honesty. But honestly, I kind of agree. If someone can't be bothered to work out or dress well or take care of their appearance, why should I invest time in getting to know them? Okay, here's a question, Amanda said, clearly enjoying this conversation. Would any of you date the ugliest guy in New York for any amount of time if you were paid to do it? How much money are we talking about? Sophia asked immediately, which made us all laugh. No, seriously though, Amanda continued. Like, would you spend a week with someone truly unattractive, going on dates, being seen in public together, pretending to be into them, if you knew there was big payoff at the end? Define big payoff, I said. My interest piqued despite myself. I don't know. Let's make it interesting, Amanda said, and I could see her wheels turning as she formulated what would become the bet that would change my life. Let's say hypothetically one of us had to spend an entire week with the most physically unattractive man in our extended social circle, going on actual dates, attending events together, being photographed together for social media, basically acting like we were dating. Whoever could do it without complaining or backing out would win $5,000 contributed by everyone else in the group. That's a lot of money, Lauren said thoughtfully, but also a lot of humiliation being seen with someone ugly for an entire week. Would we have to be physically intimate? Sophia asked, looking genuinely concerned. Let's say no, Amanda clarified. Just dates and public appearances. No kissing or anything beyond that. I could definitely do that, I said confidently, probably too confidently in retrospect. A week is nothing. I've endured worse for money, and $5,000 would pay for that Prada bag I've been wanting. Okay, then let's make it real bet, Amanda said, pulling out her phone. We each put in $1,000. Winner takes all $5,000. Loser has to spend 1 week dating whoever we collectively decide is most unattractive man in our social network. Wait, are we actually doing this? Emily asked, and again there was that strange tone in her voice that I should have paid more attention to. Why not? I said, feeling rush of excitement at the prospect. We're always talking about our standards and our requirements. Let's see who can actually back it up when challenged. I'm in. Within 10 minutes, we had all agreed to the terms and put money into pot using Venmo. The bet was simple. We would each try to last 1 week dating men we found unattractive who were part of our extended social circle. Whoever could complete the week with best attitude, meaning most convincing portrayal of being interested and attracted to their assigned partner, would win the pot. Anyone who complained, made excuses, or tried to back out would forfeit their contribution and be subjected to additional social punishment to be determined by the group. So, how do we assign partners? Sophia asked. Let's each write down name of guy in our social network we find most unattractive, Amanda suggested. Then we'll match names to people randomly. We spent next 20 minutes writing names, some laughing, some wincing, and then Amanda collected all the papers, mixed them up, and started assigning them. Sophia got paired with guy from her gym who was apparently very short and had bad skin. Lauren got matched with her coworker who was overweight and had terrible fashion sense. Amanda got someone from her building who was balding prematurely. And then it was my turn. Madison, Amanda said with barely suppressed grin as she read the name on paper. You got Jeremy Chen. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly who Jeremy Chen was. He was acquaintance in our extended social circle, someone who appeared occasionally at events and parties, and he was without question one of the most physically unfortunate-looking people I had ever encountered in Manhattan's social scene. He was roughly 30 years old, average height maybe 5'9" or 5'10", but his facial features were catastrophically unlucky combination of genetic bad fortune. He had severe lazy eye where one eye pointed significantly inward, making it disturbing to look at him directly. His teeth were horrifically crooked and yellowed with visible gaps and serious overbite. His skin was covered in deep acne scars that no amount of dermatology had been able to fix. His nose was bulbous and dominated his face in unflattering way. His hair was thinning badly with obvious bald patches. He dressed in ill-fitting clothes that looked like they came from discount stores. I had actively avoided him at every event where I'd seen him because I found him so physically repulsive. "Oh my God," I said, genuine horror in my voice. "You can't be serious, Jeremy. Have you looked at him? He's like actually ugly. Not just unattractive, but genuinely unfortunate looking." "Those are the rules, Madison," Amanda said, clearly delighted by my reaction. "You said you could handle a week with anyone, so prove it." "Fine," I said, my pride overriding my disgust. "1 week, how hard can it be? He should be grateful someone like me is willing to be seen with him honestly." Emily had been assigned to date Guy from her company, who was apparently socially awkward and poorly dressed, but not horrifically unattractive. When she heard her assignment, she just nodded calmly and said, "Okay, should be interesting experiment," which should have been my first clue that something was not what it seemed. The bet officially started the following Monday. We had each reached out to our assigned partners over the weekend to set up initial dates. I had sent Jeremy a message on social media saying that some mutual friends had suggested we get to know each other better, and would he want to grab coffee? To my surprise, he had responded almost immediately saying he would love to and suggesting very nice coffee shop in Midtown, which seemed above what I would have expected from someone who dressed and presented himself so poorly. I met him Monday afternoon at the designated coffee shop. I had dressed down significantly from my usual standard because I didn't want anyone I knew to see me looking my best with someone who looked like him. I wore simple jeans and sweater with minimal makeup. I arrived 10 minutes late deliberately because I didn't want to seem too eager. And when I walked in and saw him sitting at corner table, my first instinct was to turn around and walk out. He looked even worse than I remembered. The lazy eye was immediately noticeable and made me uncomfortable to look at. His smile when he saw me revealed the full horror of his terrible teeth. He was wearing polo shirt that was slightly too small and khaki pants that were wrinkled. He stood up awkwardly when I approached and knocked over his water glass in his nervousness, and I had to physically restrain myself from showing visible disgust on my face. "Madison, thank you so much for meeting me," he said. His voice was actually pleasant and educated, but I barely registered that because I was so focused on his appearance. "I was really surprised and excited when you reached out. I've seen you at events before and always thought you seemed interesting, but I never had courage to introduce myself." "Yeah, well, here I am," I said with forced smile that felt painful to maintain. I sat down across from him and ordered expensive latte that I made sure he understood he would be paying for since this was technically a date. The next hour was absolutely excruciating for me. Jeremy tried to make conversation, asking me questions about my work and my interests, sharing stories about his own life, attempting to be charming and engaging. And to his credit, he was actually intelligent and articulate. He talked about his work in some kind of tech field that I didn't really pay attention to. He asked thoughtful questions about my social media work and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. He made several jokes that were actually funny, but I could not get past his appearance. Every time I looked at his face, I felt wave of revulsion. The lazy eye that never quite looked at me directly, the terrible teeth that were visible every time he smiled or laughed, the acne-scarred skin. It was all I could focus on. I responded to his questions with minimal enthusiasm, giving short answers that didn't encourage further conversation. I checked my phone constantly, making it obvious I would rather be anywhere else. I made no effort to hide my discomfort or my lack of interest, and several times I caught myself making facial expressions of disgust that I quickly tried to mask, but not before he definitely noticed. I saw something flicker in his eyes each time, hurt maybe, or recognition of my disdain, but he maintained his pleasant demeanor throughout. "So, I was thinking," Jeremy said toward end of our coffee date, "there's art gallery opening in Chelsea on Wednesday evening. Would you want to go with me? It's contemporary art. Should be interesting crowd." My immediate internal response was absolute horror at idea of spending another moment with him, let alone attending public event where people might see us together. But I remembered the bet and the $5,000 and my pride that wouldn't let me lose. So I forced another painful smile and said, "Sure, why not? Text me the details." When I left that coffee shop, I immediately called Amanda and said, "This is going to be the longest week of my life. He's even worse in person than at events. I don't know how I'm going to do this without throwing up." "You're so dramatic, Madison," Amanda laughed. "It's 1 week. You can survive anything for 1 week. Think of it as character building." "More like character destroying," I muttered. "But I'm going to win this bet. There's no way I'm losing to you guys." The next several days followed similar pattern. Jeremy would suggest dates and activities that were actually thoughtful and interesting. Nice restaurants, cultural events, walks through Central Park, and each time I would attend with absolute minimum effort and maximum visible discomfort. I never complimented him, never laughed genuinely at his jokes, never asked questions about his life that showed real interest. I made it abundantly clear through my body language and my facial expressions that I found him physically repulsive and was only there out of obligation. On our third date at small Italian restaurant in West Village, I made particularly cruel comment that I should have recognized in the moment as crossing line, but my arrogance and entitlement made me think was justified. The restaurant was dimly lit with romantic ambiance that made me uncomfortable, because it felt too intimate for someone I found so disgusting. Jeremy had ordered bottle of nice wine and was attempting to create pleasant evening. He was telling me story about his college years that was actually entertaining, but I was barely listening because I was so focused on how much I didn't want to be there. You seem distracted, Jeremy said gently. Is everything okay? If you're not enjoying yourself, we can leave. It's fine, I said dismissively. I'm just tired, long week at work. I really appreciate you spending time with me, he continued, and there was genuine warmth in his voice that should have made me feel guilty, but instead just made me more annoyed. I know I'm not exactly catch in the looks department. I've dealt with that my whole life, people judging me on my appearance before they get to know me. But you seem different. You reached out to me. I thought maybe you were a person who could see past superficial things. The fact that he was being vulnerable and genuine made me even more irritated because it made me feel guilty, and I didn't want to feel guilty. I wanted to maintain my sense of superiority and my judgment that I was doing him favor by even being seen with him. So I responded with cruelty that still makes me wince when I think about it. Look, Jeremy, I said in tone that was condescending and cold. Let's be real here. I'm way out of your league physically. You're lucky someone like me is willing to spend time with you at all. So maybe just enjoy it without analyzing everything and making it weird, okay? I watched his face change, saw the hurt register in his eyes, the one that looked straight while the other wandered, saw him physically recoil slightly from my words, and for a brief moment I felt something like shame. But then, my pride kicked in and I rationalized that I was just being honest, that he needed to understand the reality of our situation, that I was doing him favor by being direct. Right, he said quietly, and the warmth had left his voice completely, replaced by something I couldn't quite identify. Just enjoying it. Got it. The rest of the dinner was awkward and silent when he paid the bill, which was over $200 for a meal that I had barely touched because I had no appetite. He didn't make eye contact with me, and when we left the restaurant, he said polite goodbye and walked away without trying to plan our next date like he had after previous encounters. What I didn't know, what I had no way of knowing because I was so wrapped up in my own superficial judgments and my arrogant certainty that I understood exactly what was happening, was that literally everything about the situation was elaborately constructed test, that Jeremy Chen was not who he appeared to be at all, that every moment of our interactions was being documented and evaluated, that I was being given opportunity to show my true character, and I was failing spectacularly. The truth, which I would learn in most humiliating way possible, was this. Jeremy Chen was actually Alexander James Sutton, 32-year-old heir to massive commercial real estate fortune worth estimated $3 billion. He was one of wealthiest young men in New York City, and without the elaborate prosthetic makeup and costume that created his ugly appearance, he was actually extraordinarily handsome, over 6 feet tall with athletic build, perfect features, the kind of man who could be model or actor if he wanted. Alexander had grown up dealing with constant attention from women who were interested in his money and his looks. He had been used and betrayed multiple times by women who pretended to love him, but really only wanted access to his wealth and status. He had become deeply cynical about ever finding someone who would value him for his actual character and personality, rather than his external attributes. And so he had devised this elaborate test to screen potential partners. He would disguise himself as completely unattractive person, interact with women in his social circle, and see who would treat him with basic human decency and kindness, regardless of his appearance. The bet had not been random chance. It had been carefully orchestrated by Alexander working with Emily, my supposed best friend who I would learn was actually far better person than I had ever given her credit for. Emily had met Alexander months earlier through mutual friends. They had become close platonically. And when he had explained his frustration about finding genuine person who would value character over appearance, Emily had immediately thought of our friend group and how superficial we all were. She had suggested this test knowing that it would reveal true nature of everyone involved. Emily's assigned partner had been one of Alexander's friends who was also disguised but not nearly as extremely as Alexander was, and throughout the week while I was treating Alexander like absolute garbage, Emily had been treating his friend with genuine kindness and respect, having real conversations, showing authentic interest, proving that she was exactly the kind of person who could see past superficial appearances. Meanwhile, throughout the week that I was going on dates with Jeremy, Alexander was documenting everything. He had cameras in his glasses recording our interactions. He had audio equipment capturing our conversations. He was taking notes on every cruel comment I made, every expression of disgust, every moment where I showed my complete lack of basic human empathy and decency. On Friday evening, the 6th day of our week-long bet, Jeremy texted me asking if I would attend charity gala with him on Saturday night. He said that he had tickets and would love if I would be his date. He promised it would be last time he would ask me for dates since our week would be over after Saturday. I was so close to winning the bet that I agreed. Despite my intense desire to be done with the whole situation, I figured one more evening of forced tolerance and I would collect my $5,000 and never have to see his unfortunate face again. Saturday evening, I actually made significant effort with my appearance because the gala was being held at Plaza Hotel, and I knew there would be important people there. I wore expensive designer gown that I had bought specifically for occasions like this. I had my hair professionally styled. My makeup was flawless. I looked absolutely stunning, if I'm being honest. And when Jeremy picked me up in what I assumed was hired car service that he probably couldn't really afford, he looked exactly as I expected. Same terrible appearance, barely improved by ill-fitting tuxedo that looked rented. We arrived at the plaza, and it was exactly the kind of event I loved. Hundreds of wealthy and beautiful people in formal wear, champagne and hors d'oeuvres, live music. The ballroom was decorated spectacularly, and I was in my element feeling superior and glamorous until I realized that I was there with Jeremy, and people were definitely noticing the stark contrast between my appearance and his. I saw people doing double takes when they saw us together, saw whispers and barely concealed expressions of confusion about why someone who looked like me would be with someone who looked like him. "Let's get some champagne," Jeremy suggested, and we made our way to the bar where he ordered 2 glasses. As we stood there, I positioned myself slightly away from him, trying to create physical distance that might make it less obvious we were together. I was scanning the room looking for anyone I knew, hoping I wouldn't have to explain who my date was. "Madison," Jeremy said, and something in his tone made me actually look at him. "I want to thank you for this week. I know it wasn't easy for you. I could tell from the beginning that you found me physically unattractive and were only spending time with me out of some obligation or perhaps a bet." My blood ran cold. How did he know about the bet? I tried to maintain innocent expression. "I don't know what you're talking about. I've enjoyed getting to know you." "Please don't lie," he said, and there was no anger in his voice, just resignation and maybe disappointment. "I've seen the way you look at me, the expressions of disgust you try to hide, the cruel comments you've made, the way you check your phone constantly when we're together, the minimum effort you put into every conversation. I'm not stupid, Madison. I know exactly what this was." Before I could respond, the lights in the ballroom dimmed slightly, and attention turned to small stage that had been set up at front of the room. There was announcement that there would be brief presentation from the evening's main sponsor, and I assumed it would be boring speech from some rich old philanthropist about whatever charity we were supporting. But what happened next was beginning of the most humiliating experience of my entire life. Alexander James Sutton, one of the most eligible and wealthy young bachelors in New York City, walked onto the stage, and I recognized him immediately from social media and gossip columns. Even though I had never met him in person, he was absolutely gorgeous, tall, impeccably dressed in custom tuxedo that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. He had the kind of presence that commanded attention, and as I looked at him and then looked at my date, Jeremy, standing beside me, I felt confusion about why Jeremy had specifically mentioned the main sponsor. Surely he didn't know someone like Alexander Sutton. Alexander began speaking into microphone. His voice was confident and charismatic. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for attending tonight's gala, supporting children's literacy programs in underprivileged communities. As many of you know, I'm passionate about education and giving opportunities to children, regardless of their circumstances, or how society judges them based on superficial factors." He paused, and his eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on me, and he smiled in a way that made my stomach drop with sudden, inexplicable dread. "Tonight, I want to talk about a social experiment I've been conducting for the past week," he continued, and the room went completely silent, everyone's attention focused on him. "I wanted to understand something about human nature, about how we treat people based on their appearance, about whether genuine kindness and character still exist in a world that seems increasingly focused on superficial beauty and material wealth." I felt Jeremy shift beside me, and when I looked at him, he was watching the stage with expression that I still couldn't read. "So I disguised myself," Alexander said, and as he spoke, assistants walked onto stage carrying large video screens. I used professional prosthetic makeup, costume design, everything necessary to transform my appearance into someone conventionally unattractive, someone who our society often ignores or dismisses or treats with cruelty simply because they don't meet arbitrary standards of beauty. And then I interacted with various people in my social circle to see how they would treat someone who had nothing obvious to offer them: no wealth, no status, no physical attractiveness. The video screens lit up, and to my absolute horror, I saw myself on those screens. Video footage from every single date I had been on with Jeremy over the past week, and my stomach turned to ice as I realized with dawning comprehension what was about to happen. "This woman is Madison Hartley," Alexander said, gesturing to the screens where video of me from our first coffee date was playing, showing me checking my phone constantly, showing my expressions of barely concealed disgust, showing me giving short, dismissive answers to Jeremy's questions. "She reached out to me when I was in disguise, and over the course of the past week, I've documented how she treated someone she perceived as physically unattractive and therefore beneath her." The crowd was watching in stunned silence, and I felt hundreds of eyes turn to look at me standing in back of ballroom. I wanted to disappear, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen in absolute horror watching my own cruelty being broadcast to everyone in the room. The video montage continued, showing moment after moment of my terrible behavior. My cruel comment at the restaurant about him being lucky someone like me was willing to spend time with him. My constant expressions of disgust. My body language that screamed repulsion. My checking phone every few minutes. My making excuses to cut dates short. Every single horrible thing I had said or done was captured in high definition and being played for ballroom full of New York's elite to witness. "And this," Alexander said, turning to gesture toward where I was standing with Jeremy, "is what I looked like during those interactions." And then Jeremy reached up and began removing his face, and I watched in absolute shock as the prosthetics came off, revealing the perfect, handsome features of Alexander Sutton underneath. The lazy eye had been special contact lens. The terrible teeth had been prosthetic overlay. The acne scars had been incredibly realistic makeup. The thinning hair had been partially a skull cap. Everything had been elaborate disguise, and standing next to me now in that ill-fitting tuxedo was one of the most handsome and wealthy men in New York City who I had treated like absolute garbage for an entire week. The crowd gasped audibly. There was scattered applause, and I felt my face burning with humiliation so intense I thought I might actually faint. "Madison had opportunity this week to show kindness to someone who had nothing obvious to offer her," Alexander continued, and his voice had hardened now. All the warmth and pleasantness that Jeremy had tried to show me was gone, replaced by cold judgment. She could have chosen to be a decent human being, to engage in genuine conversation, to treat another person with basic respect regardless of their appearance, but instead she chose cruelty, condescension, and contempt. She made it clear, repeatedly, that she found me physically disgusting and was only tolerating my presence out of obligation to a bet she had made with her friends. Another gasp from the crowd. People were definitely staring at me now. I could feel the weight of their judgment, and I wanted to defend myself, to explain, but what explanation could possibly justify what everyone had just witnessed on those video screens? "But I want to show you something else," Alexander said, and the video screens changed to show different footage, this time showing Emily, my supposed best friend, on dates with Alexander's friend who had also been in disguise, and the contrast was devastating. The video showed Emily treating her assigned partner with genuine kindness and interest, having real conversations, laughing at his jokes authentically, asking thoughtful questions, showing none of the disgust or superiority that I had displayed. She was demonstrating exactly the kind of character and decency that Alexander had been searching for. "This is Emily Parker," Alexander said, and he gestured to somewhere in crowd. Emily stepped forward, looking beautiful and calm. She didn't know about the specific test. She thought she was participating in a simple bet among friends, but she chose kindness anyway. She treated someone she perceived as less attractive with dignity and respect, because that's the kind of person she is fundamentally. She has character and depth that goes beyond surface appearances. Alexander walked down from the stage and approached Emily, and I watched with growing horror and jealousy as he took her hand. "Emily, I know this is somewhat public and perhaps unconventional, but I've gotten to know you over these past weeks, not just through this test, but through many conversations we've had as friends, and I've come to realize that you're exactly the kind of person I've been searching for. Someone who values character over appearance, kindness over status, authentic, connection over superficial attraction." And then Alexander James Sutton, billionaire heir, one of most eligible bachelors in New York, got down on one knee in front of my best friend while I stood there watching, having just been publicly humiliated in front of hundreds of people, and he pulled out ring box, opened it to reveal diamond ring that probably cost more than I would earn in 10 years, and he said loud enough for entire ballroom to hear, "Emily Parker, will you marry me?" The crowd erupted in applause and excited chatter. Emily had tears streaming down her face. She nodded yes and said, "Of course, yes." And Alexander stood up and kissed her. And everyone in the ballroom was celebrating this romantic moment, while I stood there in my expensive gown feeling like I was going to be sick, watching my best friend get engaged to billionaire that I had just spent a week treating like garbage because I couldn't see past the ugly disguise to the remarkable person underneath. But the humiliation wasn't over, because in that moment my pride and my arrogance and my complete inability to accept responsibility for my own actions and my own terrible character took over. Instead of feeling ashamed or apologetic or any appropriate emotion given what had just been revealed about me, I felt rage. I felt entitled to my anger. I felt like I was the victim somehow. I stormed up to where Alexander and Emily were standing, surrounded by people congratulating them. I pushed through the crowd, and I said loudly enough for many people to hear, "This is bullshit. You manipulated me. You tricked me into this situation. You had no right to record me without my permission and show those videos publicly. I'm going to sue you for invasion of privacy." Alexander looked at me with expression of such profound disappointment that it was almost worse than anger would have. "Ben, Madison, everything I did was legal. You were in public spaces where there's no expectation of privacy. More importantly, though, no one forced you to behave the way you did. The test didn't make you cruel. It simply revealed cruelty that was already there. You had every opportunity to be kind, and you chose not to be." "I was kind," I insisted, my voice rising. "I spent the entire week going on dates with someone I found repulsive when I could have just backed out. I fulfilled the terms of the bet. I deserve that prize money." "You think you deserve reward for barely tolerating someone's existence?" Emily said, and I had never heard that tone from her before. It was disappointment mixed with disgust. "Madison, listen to yourself. You still don't get it. You're standing here at what should be one of happiest moments of my life, making it about you and your wounded pride." "You were in on this," I accused her. "You pretended to be my friend while you were plotting with him to humiliate me." "I am your friend," Emily said sadly. "Or I was trying to be, but you've made it impossible. You've shown me over these past weeks, including tonight, who you really are when you think no one important is watching. And I don't like that person, Madison. I don't think I can be friends with someone who has so little empathy and so much arrogance." People around us were definitely listening now. This was becoming second spectacle of the evening, and I could feel my reputation crumbling around me in real time. These were people in my social and professional network, people whose opinions mattered, and they had all just witnessed not only my cruel behavior in the videos, but also my complete inability to show humility or remorse now that I had been caught. "You're all hypocrites," I said desperately, trying to deflect. "You all judge people on appearance. You all care about status and money. You're just pretending to be better than me, but you're not." "The difference, Madison," Alexander said calmly, "is that most people at least try to be kind. They may have superficial thoughts, but they don't act on them with such cruelty. They don't make others feel worthless because of how they look, and when they're confronted with their own behavior, they have enough self-awareness to feel ashamed and apologize. You have none of that. Even now, with all the evidence in front of you, you can't admit you were wrong. He was right, and I knew it, but I couldn't make myself say it. Couldn't make myself back down. My pride was too strong, my arrogance too deeply ingrained, so instead I did what I always did when cornered. I lashed out with more cruelty. "You know what? Fine. You two deserve each other," I said with venom in my voice. "Emily, you can have him. You always were more desperate than me anyway, settling for guys who weren't quite good enough. At least now you're getting paid well for it. Congratulations on landing the rich guy. I'm sure it has nothing to do with his money." The crowd around us gasped. Several people actually said, "Oh my God," out loud, and Emily's face went pale. I had just insulted her at her engagement, suggested she was gold digger, in front of hundreds of people, including her new fiancé. It was possibly the cruelest thing I could have said in that moment, and I said it because I wanted to hurt her the way I felt hurt. Alexander stepped forward, putting himself slightly between Emily and me. "You need to leave Madison right now, before you make this any worse than you already have." "I'm leaving," I said, trying to maintain some shred of dignity. "I can't stand being here another second anyway. Enjoy your fake romance. I give it 6 months before you realize she's just like everyone else." I turned and walked out of the ballroom, out of the Plaza Hotel into the cold New York night, and as I stood on the sidewalk trying to hail a cab, I felt my phone start buzzing continuously with notifications. People were already posting about what had happened at the gala. The videos of my cruel behavior were being shared on social media. My Instagram was being flooded with comments calling me shallow, heartless, cruel. Within hours, the entire incident had gone viral. I was being canceled in real time by thousands of people who had seen the evidence of my terrible character and rightfully condemned it. The next several weeks were absolute nightmare. I lost my job because my employer didn't want to be associated with someone who had such negative publicity. Several of my brand partnerships were immediately terminated. I lost over half of my Instagram followers. The ones who remained mostly followed me just to leave hateful comments. My 3 friends from the bet, Sophia, Lauren, and Amanda, all distanced themselves from me, publicly saying they were horrified by my behavior and didn't want to be associated with me. Even my roommates asked me to move out, saying they couldn't live with someone who had shown such cruelty and lack of character. I had to move back to my parents' house in Connecticut, which was humiliating beyond words. I was 26 years old, moving back into my childhood bedroom, because I couldn't afford my New York rent without my job and my sponsorships. My parents, who had never approved of my superficial lifestyle and materialistic values, were sympathetic, but also disappointed. "We raised you better than this, Madison," my mother said sadly. "How did you become someone so focused on appearances that you forgot basic human decency?" I spent weeks in that bedroom scrolling through social media, seeing my face and my cruel comments shared and reshared, becoming meme, becoming cautionary tale, becoming example of everything wrong with influencer culture and superficial values. I saw think pieces written about me in online magazines discussing how my behavior reflected larger societal problems with how we treat people who don't meet conventional beauty standards. I saw videos of people reacting to the footage of my cruelty, expressing disgust and disappointment. I became internet villain overnight, and there was no redemption arc available to me because I still couldn't bring myself to feel truly sorry. The worst part, the absolute worst part, was watching Emily and Alexander's relationship flourish publicly, while mine fell apart. They got married 3 months after the gala and wedding that was covered by Society magazines and talked about extensively online. The photos were beautiful. Emily looked radiant. Alexander looked at her with such genuine love and adoration. In interviews they gave, they talked about how the test had brought them together, how Emily's kindness had been exactly what Alexander had been searching for, how grateful they were that the truth had been revealed about everyone's character, including mine. "I don't hate Madison," Emily said in one interview that I read obsessively even though it hurt. "I'm sad for her, honestly. She had opportunity to show kindness, and she chose cruelty. She had chance at genuine friendship, and she chose superiority. She could have been happy for me when good things happened, but she chose jealousy and spite. I hope eventually she learns from this and becomes a better person, but that growth has to come from her. No one can force her to change." Her words were kind, which somehow made them worse. I wanted her to be angry and vindictive so I could feel justified in my own anger. But she was gracious and mature, and it highlighted how immature and petty I had been. I tried to rebuild my life and my reputation. I posted an apology video on Instagram that was widely criticized as insincere and performative. People said I was only apologizing because I got caught, not because I genuinely felt remorse. They weren't wrong. I tried to get new jobs, but my Google search results were dominated by articles about the gala incident. Any potential employer who searched my name immediately found all the evidence of my terrible character. I was essentially unemployable in any field that involved public interaction or brand representation. I ended up taking job as receptionist at dental office in Connecticut, making $15 an hour, which after living in Manhattan and making nearly $90,000 annually felt like ultimate degradation. I had to sell most of my designer clothes and bags to pay off debts. I had to delete my Instagram account because the harassment never stopped. I had to start over completely, but without any of the advantages of youth and naivety, because I was now 27 years old with destroyed reputation and no real skills beyond social media management that no one would hire me to do. And through all of this, the thing I struggled with most was not the financial hardship or the loss of status or the public humiliation. It was my inability to genuinely accept responsibility and feel authentic remorse. I knew intellectually that I had been wrong, that I had treated Alexander terribly, that I had shown appalling lack of character and empathy, but emotionally I still felt like I was victim somehow. Like I had been unfairly targeted and humiliated, like the punishment didn't fit the crime. I would lie in bed at night thinking about the week I spent with Alexander in disguise, replaying every cruel comment I made, every expression of disgust, every moment where I could have chosen kindness and chose cruelty instead. And I would try to feel ashamed, but mostly I just felt angry. angry at him for testing me, angry at Emily for being part of it, angry at myself for failing, but not in a way that led to real growth, just in a way that led to more bitterness. The truth that I couldn't admit to anyone, including myself, was that I hadn't really changed. I had just learned to hide my superficiality and cruelty better. I still judged people primarily on their appearance. I still valued external attributes over internal character. I still felt superior to people I deemed less attractive or successful than me. I had just learned through painful experience that expressing those judgments publicly had severe consequences. About 6 months after the gala incident, I saw an announcement online that Emily was pregnant. She and Alexander were expecting their first child. The photos they shared showed them glowing with happiness, looking at each other with such genuine love, building life together based on authentic connection and mutual respect. Everything I could have had if I had been a different person, if I had been capable of seeing past Alexander's disguised appearance to the remarkable person underneath. I stared at those photos for a long time, trying to feel happiness for my former best friend, but feeling only jealousy and regret. Not regret for my behavior, but regret for the outcome. I didn't wish I had been kinder to Alexander because it was the right thing to do. I wished I had been kinder because it would have benefited me materially. And that distinction, that fundamental difference between real character growth and strategic behavior modification, was something I couldn't overcome. Now, 2 years after the gala, I'm 28 years old, working as administrative assistant, making $38,000 a year, living in a small apartment in Hartford, Connecticut, single, because any man I try to date eventually discovers who I am and what I did and wants nothing to do with me, still bitter and resentful despite knowing that my bitterness is destroying any chance I have at happiness or redemption. I see updates about Alexander and Emily occasionally. They had beautiful baby girl who they named Grace, which feels pointed somehow. They live in a stunning townhouse in Upper East Side. They're involved in multiple charitable causes. They seem genuinely happy in a way that I know I will never be because I'm fundamentally broken in ways I can't or won't fix. The lesson I was supposed to learn from this experience was clear. That character matters more than appearance. That kindness costs nothing but means everything. That treating people with decency regardless of what they can offer you is basic requirement of being a good person. That pride and arrogance lead to isolation and misery. That superficiality is empty and ultimately self-destructive. I know these lessons intellectually. I can recite them. I can acknowledge their truth in abstract sense, but I haven't internalized them. I haven't actually become a better person, despite everything that happened. I'm just a more careful person, more strategic person who learned to hide ugly interior beneath pretty exterior more effectively. And perhaps that's the real tragedy of my story. Not that I was tested and failed, not that I was publicly humiliated and lost everything, but that even after all of that, even after having every reason and opportunity to grow and change, I remain fundamentally the same person I was when I walked into that coffee shop 2 years ago to meet someone I had already decided was beneath me, based purely on his appearance. Alexander's test revealed my true character, and I failed spectacularly. But the real ongoing failure is my inability to use that revelation as catalyst for genuine change, my insistence on viewing myself as victim rather than perpetrator, my refusal to do the hard internal work of examining my values and rebuilding my character from ground up. Emily got her fairy tale ending with Prince, who tested her and found her worthy. I got exactly what I deserved, which was loss and isolation and the knowledge that I had opportunity for something real, and destroyed it through my own cruelty and arrogance. And unlike Emily, I don't get redemption arc because redemption requires humility and genuine remorse and capacity for change that I simply don't possess. This is my confession, my cautionary tale, my admission that sometimes people don't learn from their mistakes no matter how devastating the consequences. Sometimes the ugly person isn't the one with unfortunate physical features, but rather the one with ugly soul who can't see past surface appearances. Sometimes you get exactly what you deserve, and it's not pretty or redemptive or instructive. It's just sad and empty and permanent. My name is Madison Claire Hartley. I'm 28 years old. I lost the bet and the test and the friendship and the opportunity of a lifetime. And the worst part is that I still can't fully accept that it was my own fault, that my superficiality and cruelty earned me exactly the isolation and misery I now experience. And that admission, that I remain unrepentant and unchanged despite everything, is perhaps the most honest and ugly thing I can say about myself. Beauty fades, money disappears, status is temporary, but character is permanent, and mine was revealed to be fundamentally deficient in all the ways that truly matter. And no amount of external prettiness can compensate for internal ugliness when someone finally bothers to look beneath the surface and see who you really are. And I am proof that not every story ends with growth and redemption. Sometimes the ending is just acknowledgement that you failed the test and learned nothing and will probably continue to fail until you die alone and bitter, having wasted every opportunity you were given to be a better person than you are.